Good afternoon, everybody. I am Safia Lakhdin. I'm a career advisor with Career Service. I said I would start at 2 minutes past the hour. Welcome to all of you, and we've taken the time out of your busy schedules to join us in our conversation around my career in engineering in the built environment. Before I introduce the panelists to everybody, just a couple of house rules. Please can I ask you to keep your microphones muted, your video cameras switched off. We will have time towards the end for you to ask questions. So if I can ask you to post your questions in the chat, and my colleague Megan Blacker will collate them and send them to us. Welcome to all of you. Without further ado, let me introduce the panel in no particular order. Firstly, Chelsea Harvey, who is a geospatial developer at Explore AI. Welcome, Chelsea. Chelsea's situated and located in Pretoria. I can't wait for you all to share your career journeys with us. Welcome, Mkhokheli, who's from Eindhoven, sitting in Eindhoven, and he's a mechanical designer at Philips. Then Sergio Cieverts or Cieverts. Sergio, I wasn't sure how to pronounce your surname. How do I pronounce it?
Cieverts.
Cieverts. This is an interesting transition. Sergio is a senior economist at SASO, so it will be interesting to hear the switch from engineering to become an economist and to hear about your journey. And last but not least, welcome Thalia Pillay, who is a software engineer at Aerobotics. And she's joining us from Cape Town as well. Thank you for your time. I appreciate that you have made the time to join us. We are a full panel. We have a lot of questions to get through, and so I'd like to start off with you, Thalia, if I can ask you, and this will be a question for everybody. Just a reminder that if you can switch off your mic if you are not answering a question, so that there's no feedback. And I'm going to take the liberty of keeping my microphone on because I always forget to switch it back on again. So I guess those are the privileges of the facilitator. So Thalia, if I can start with you, can you just give us a brief account of your career journey to date? What your degree was, what you studied, what your first job is, and your progression to where you are now.
Sure. Well, firstly, welcome everyone. Honored to be here today. So as Sophia said, my name is Thalia. I studied mechatronics engineering at UCT as well. I graduated in 2018, which feels like a while ago, especially with COVID, but it wasn't too long ago. My first job straight out of university was on the graduate program at Investec in Johannesburg, which is obviously a typical corporate job. And a lot of my peers were like, you sold out to become a software engineer, which is really not the case at all. What was really, really cool about my first job there was that I was placed in a team that did the voice biometrics and voice analytics for the bank, which was just so fascinating, especially like in terms of fraud. And then if you look at like the machine learning behind it, so it was really great exposure. I then got invited to join another team within Investec, which did a lot of like cloud containerization and Kubernetes, which was a lot more cutting edge and things I hadn't learned anything about before. So it was also really great learning. And then in January of this year, I got approached to start up a team at the small startup called Aerobotics, which was founded by 2 mechatronics students from UCT in 2014 and has reached like really great success. We use drones for agricultural purposes. So we look at like the health of trees, how many fruits are in certain orchards and things like that. So that's currently where I'm working in the national startup and like really, really loving it.
Thank you, Thalia. Sergio, can you share us your journey with us, please? Just a brief. Yeah,
thanks. So I studied chemical engineering at UCT, graduated what was a long time ago, 2008. So that's sort of 12 years of work. The first 6 of those I spent straight from university in Secunda on the plant, of technical support, and PPE, and daily operations, supporting the plant, sort of getting the production out. So that was my sort of technical experience. I think after having done it for 6 years, I was a bit more interested in sort of the business side elements of sort of how does the company run and how does it make money and so on. And in my 6 years at BCom in finance, decided that I would like to sort of merge my understanding of engineering with a bit of commerce, and ended up as an analyst, sort of investment analyst in Sasol. And since then I've done all sorts of investment analysis and economic work for Sasol. So it's very useful having had the background in engineering, sort of understanding the technical detail and knowing where it fits in, and then being able to communicate with economists and accountants and so on, and fitting that into the sort of business. So it's been very useful for me to be able to contribute where I can in both those spheres, and I've enjoyed it so far. I mean, it's been who knows where to next, but it's been a good journey so far for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Cheryl. Mkhokheli, what was it? Describe your journey to us.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. So I am a mechanical designer with Philips, which I think at some point in our lives, most of us may have had a Philips gadget in our house, TV, radio, whichever. But I work for the healthcare business. So I am a biomedical engineer by qualification. I did my undergraduate degree in electromechanical, UCT, finished in 2011. Then took 3 years to do my master's, which I finished at the end of 2014. And then from then onwards, I thought my passion has always been like affordable healthcare. I took a year off to go back to my own home country. I am originally from Zimbabwe. So I went back to Zimbabwe for a year to try and start a startup. This startup was evolving around creating databases for clinics and hospitals, but that didn't work out so well. So I came back to UCT and I worked for a startup called Straight Access Technologies, which makes affordable catheters or cardiac devices. I worked there for 3 years before I actually got called up into Europe by Philips. So then I joined Philips in the bit years ago, 2.5 years ago, to join their team in productivity, which means that we look at the system which does interventional X-rays, and we try to make the system more affordable for different markets. Yeah, so that's what I do, is applying my engineering skills, but also looking at it from the technical and the business level as well. Yeah, it's some level of business level. Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah.
Thank you, Mkhokheli. Chelsea.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for having me. So currently I work as a geospatial developer. I graduated from a geomatics degree at the end of 2018, which seems quite far back now. I majored in the surveying stream. My first job straight out of varsity was working as a geospatial developer for Esri South Africa. So that involved a lot of utilities projects, doing data processing pipelines, data transformations, setting up databases for clients, writing geoprocessing scripts. I mainly worked in Python. I did a little bit of work in C#, did a little bit of work in JavaScript. And then I started a different job in, I think it was the end of 2020, with Explore AI, which is where I currently am. So I pivoted a little bit more into the data science world. Now I currently work, our main client is Thames Water. So again, utilities, which seems to kind of be the thing that I'm on at the moment. We do surge blockage models, so training models to detect if a blockage, if an alarm is going off, is it actually a blockage or is it perhaps a false alarm? Looking at rainfall data and that sort of stuff to help us out. I helped build the front end. I did back end work. So yeah, got a bit of everything.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And that seems to be a theme, quite a bit of everything from what I've heard you all share, and also a kind of pivoting from what you started out to something different, common theme that I'm hearing. So that must have meant that you must have had skills that were applicable across different disciplines, across different different roles that you've had. And so I'm interested, Sergio, what were the core skills that you use in your current role that you either got from your degree or that you have acquired over time from different experiences that you've had?
Yeah, I think to me anyway, the theme in my career so far has been maths. I mean, that's how I see it. So whether I was working in engineering, doing the details for sort of sizing columns, all the way now to figuring out all price projections and then figuring out investment discussions. And what I think my core skill there is being able to assimilate complicated pieces of data and sort of mathematically tie them together and provide insight to management. I think that skill I've been able to apply in all the fields. The other thing is problem solving. So you're faced with an issue. So this is what you've got to solve. Be the field in finance or an investment discussion, or whether it's an engineering problem. How do you break that down and figure out how to get to a solution? I think those skills I find have been applicable across fields.
So that was a transferable skill you could have used in all of the roles that you've had and stood you in good stead.
Yeah, definitely.
What were the skills for you, Mkhokheli?
I think the major skill that I got through my studies is sort of like keeping an overview of things. So I studied electromechanical engineering, which means it's a marriage between mechanical and a bit of electronics, a bit of electrical. So when I started out with my master's, I already kind of thought in that kind of way. But when I did my master's, it was in biomedical, which meant I was incorporating the human element there. And now working for Philips in the medical field, like I have to not only think about, is this safe for human to use and understand actually how to use it in the field, but also, is this mechanically sound? How does this interfere with the electronic components around? Plus also look at the business case. Does this make a good business case? Is this a viable product? Is this a viable idea? Yeah, so like it's actually thinking across multiple swim lanes, if I could put it that way, to come up with a solution which is viable, sustainable as well. Like now, Philips is currently leading in sustainability. Is it sustainable? What does sustainability mean in terms of like, yeah, how much energy are we using or how much materials are we wasting while we're trying to get to the final point? So it's like literally problem solving, but also I would say like an eagle's eye view, thinking of many things, not just like a particular field, but many fields. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is a kind of multidisciplinary approach to problem solving.
Yes. Yeah. Mm.
Chelsea, what are the skills that stood you in good stead?
Definitely programming, and actually quite a bit of data science. I already started in my final year with the Geomatics 4 course. That really did help me and open my eyes to exactly what I could do with my degree. Yeah, I mean, I now have quite a good coding background. A lot of database building as well that I got from courses like GIS2. It really did help me understand what I'm doing in the professional world and have a better understanding, especially when you're working with client data that's, you know, private and that sort of thing. How do you actually go about keeping those things secure? The other thing is definitely more of a UX eye, particularly with GIS. You know, everything's visual. The way that you style your maps, the colors, it sort of helps translate into building front ends, because then you have an idea, okay, this is what people like to see, this is what people don't like to see. How do you arrange things on a map? How do you arrange things on a website? So yeah, those are definitely skills that came directly from my degree.
Thank you, Chelsea. And Thalia, what were the skills for you?
I think what I really enjoyed most about doing mechatronics is that we get exposed to so many different skills. So there's obviously the mechanical skills as well as the electronic skills. And then working at aerobotics, because we do work with drones, I've applied a lot of like control theory. So an example of that would be applying a simple like control algorithm to make sure the drones don't overshoot their mark when they're trying to land, but that would obviously cost quite a lot of money. So yeah, it's a lot of control theory, similar to Chelsea, quite a lot of programming. And I think at UCT, we had some like very fundamental courses in Python and C++. But then I got just enough of a taste of that to like set the foundations and go off and build a career in that. So that was really cool. And I think really most importantly, just engineering, like design thinking. I think one thing about like your career is that it's ever changing, and like it's not really what you're doing, it's more about how you're doing it. So like the like principles I learned in like problem solving and just design thinking has really like helped me succeed in different situations. So yeah, I think that's really the biggest one for me.
So really the thinking skills is what I'm hearing, and some technical knowledge and technical skills. But I'm curious about your working context where you work with people. And so what are the kind of relationship related skills that have stood you in good stead, that you rely on, that you think are critical? Mkhokheli, if I can start with you.
I think for my role, particularly the one that I have right now, it's particularly important to be able to listen to intention or what people are trying to say at the core. Mostly because like I work in a culture that is not my own. So I work in Netherlands. So there's already a layer of culture differences right there. But also not only that, but I work with people in different places. So like managing a project with a supplier from China in Germany. So you sit in a room with someone who's actually no one has English as their first language, but we are all speaking English. Yeah. So we have to actually listen to intent and actually also be able to do sort of like reflective listening to ask people the question, if you think you've understood, to actually for them to confirm. And also like I think stakeholder management, just like self-leadership, just being able to be in control of like your own sort of like self and your own schedule, your own timetable and things like that before even leading the team. One of my mottos is self-leadership before team leadership. So before you even lead a team, you need to be able to lead yourself. So yeah, and also be aware of like what you are, like your temperament generally, so that actually when you interact with people, you're always aware as well in terms of like what you might be coming off as. So that's one of the things. The relational skills also starts with self-understanding, but also being able to communicate with people and understand the intention that the other person is also trying to say. I think that's for me has been the biggest skill that I'm using. Yeah.
Fascinating. Sergio, what are the relationship skills that you rely on, and the motto that you might have developed for yourself?
I think for me, a lot of my work depends on other people, and I mean that's always been the case that the output that we deliver is a team, and so perhaps having not taken group work in my studies as seriously as I should have, because it's an individualistic view of how you can pass this and get this done, whereas in reality it's nothing gets done without inputs or outputs to other people, and sort of working together is the challenge. And so in that sense, my skills, having picked up the skills around in university, teamwork, and how each individual person in sort of the network interacts with everybody else and with you, the importance of that can make or break whether you deliver what you need to deliver on time or not. So I think that collaborative view and the teamwork, I think that's my sort of biggest. I wish I'd spent a bit more time mastering that skill so that I would even have an easier transition into the workplace.
Thank you. Thalia, what has been the relationship skill that's worked for you?
I think when I left university, I really undermined the importance of professionalism in the workplace. I think like I was so focused on building my technical skills that like I completely forgot about how to conduct myself. So I still conducted myself well, but I think looking back now, the things that mean the most to me are just having really great communication with all your team members. So like now I'm leading up a team and like we're trying to grow the team. And it's really about growing the team with the right people. and just making sure that everyone feels like safe in that space, and then also that they're adding value. Because I've been in teams before where communication wasn't great and that wasn't a good experience for everyone. But like when you have the right momentum and the right end goal in sight, and you're all working towards it, like really magical things can happen. And yeah, I really think that working with different stakeholders is really important. And also being really close to your end users is also like very, very important. Especially when I worked at Investec, like we had like high profile clients, and it was just really good to always keep them in mind, be it with like UX, UI designs, or just making sure that they felt supported in their after hour queries. So yeah, I really think just relationships, you really just need to respect the people that you're working with, and that diversity of thought is really important when building a team.
Thank you, Thalia. And Chelsea, you're working for Thames Water and you're based in Pretoria. So how do relationships work for you? How do you make it work?
Yeah, it's been quite challenging. I won't lie, having to deal with people virtually as opposed to face-to-face makes it a little bit complicated. But also because you're not in a room with a group of people, sometimes you get sent from one pillar to post kind of thing to find the right person to help you with certain things. I've typically found with working from home, my communication skills have improved quite a bit. Because I'm somebody who really struggles with social interactions. I find it very draining because I'm very introverted. So for me, being able to type up an email or type up a message on Teams allows me to take a step back and think, okay, what am I saying? What am I trying to convey to this person? And what do I need to get out of it? Because especially when it comes to like very in-depth technical concepts, if you're not speaking to someone who's on the same level as you, in that particular discipline, you might find that, you know, what you're saying just completely goes over their head and it's not very productive, and often at times it just sort of devolves. So for me, being able to write things, being able to think things through, lets me actually take it and put it into a context that I know the other person will understand. But yeah, that's generally how I've found it. And yeah, I mean, one bit of advice that I could definitely give if you are someone who finds the social interactions a bit difficult is look for something remote. You know, now everyone is doing it. It's the latest workplace trend. Yeah.
Thank you, Chelsea. And so maybe I will start with you with the next question then. Looking back, what do you wish you had known as a student? And I just want to invite everyone in the room to, if you have any questions, please to post them in the chat. Thank you. What do you wish you knew as a student?
I think the first thing that I wish I knew is how much actually a geomatics degree offered me in terms of career options, because really when I was studying, I just had no clue. I kind of thought, well, there's like 2 jobs that I can get after this at like 3 different companies, and that's just going to be the rest of my life. And I realized I actually had a very broad skill set that could take me a lot of different places if I just applied myself. So that is the one thing. The other thing is everyone's career path is going to be different. And especially when you're kind of in your final year and everyone's looking for jobs, you kind of start comparing yourself and you think, oh, you know, should I follow this person? Should I follow that person? And you have to understand you are a unique individual. You need to find the right place for you. You need to find a job that you actually enjoy and that you get something out of. And I really did wish I understood that, because I just took the first offer that I got. I didn't really look at interviewing around, and I think I probably would have benefited from just taking a step back and trying a little bit harder to search for something that was a better fit for me.
Sergio, what would you advise students starting out?
Yeah, so looking back for me, I also took a job that I didn't think I quite, a little bit different to the previous speaker. Took a job that I didn't think that I would like. Sort of the location was in the middle of nowhere and it's going to be hot and dirty and so on. But it turned out to be a lot of fun. I think growing up in Cape Town and ending up in a small town in the middle of Mpumalanga, I always thought that was going to be an experience that I wouldn't enjoy, or it's going to be, I'm going to go there quick as I can and get out. I actually enjoyed it. I learned a lot. So I guess sometimes you don't know which opportunities sort of exist for you, and whether you'd like it or not, and how you might develop it. And it turns out that you might like it or not. I wish I approached it with a bit more of an open mind. I mean, it turned out well for me in that case. And so with other jobs that I've gotten since then, or other sort of departments, I've approached it with a more of an open mind. Sort of what can I get from this, and how can I add value to this, rather than this is something that's suitable for me and I'm never going to be interested in that topic. So just that is my 2 cents.
Mkhokheli, looking back for you, what do you wish you had known when you started out?
I think maybe 2 things. The first one is I wish I had actually known was what potential is out there for anything when you apply yourself with like much determination and focus. There's a lot to be achieved out there. But also I think the second thing which I wish I knew was I would have to do the work, not the degree itself. Because one of the mistakes that I did is like I chose the courses that I liked, I focused on those. Anything else that I didn't like, I just put it on the side. I made sure that I got like 60 or something like that. So just like something that doesn't make you prolong your degree. But now some of those things are coming back to haunt me. But as they're coming back later, they also sort of like coming back with a almost like vigor. And I would say to people like, engage with your education. Just don't do things for the sake of doing things. Yeah, but to actually, I wish I knew how to engage with my education, the whole full spectrum. I mean, surely I engaged with most of it and I passed in, but like I wish I had engaged more in everything and actually made the most out of the experience of actually having the whole day to sit and learn from probably the best people that you'll get in terms of those fields. Yeah.
Thank you. Thalia, what advice would you give students, and what do you wish you had known?
I wish I'd known not to be so scared when leaving university and starting my first job. I distinctly remember the December before I started working in January. And I literally did not speak because I was worried that they would fire me for knowing absolutely nothing about web development. And like pivoting from an engineering background into software engineering, like, you know, so many people do it, but then when you actually have to go and learn all these different frameworks and all these languages you've never heard of, it's like a very daunting task. But I think, the most important thing really is just being willing to learn, because I think like your engineering degree really sets you on the right path and like shows that you have like proven yourself time and time again of learning things. So like any obstacle that could present itself as you start your career, you'd be able to tackle. And I think what was also really great was like just realizing how much potential we have as like young engineers, that we have so much value that we can add, and it's really just like empowering yourselves to do so. And then like once you get into that spirit, like it's honestly amazing. And then my second thing really, what I wish I'd known was just to identify what you love. I think, you know, you get so wrapped up in the coursework and like, you know, it's like a course worth 8 points, whatever, and just getting a good mark. But at the end of the day, you need to like identify what particularly you liked about that course. And you don't necessarily have to be getting like 90% in order to identify what you love. I think it really should just be identify what you love, why you love it, and then try and make a career out of it. Because I think that's really where great things will happen, and just like trying to shape your path, because as the other panelists said, there are so many cool jobs out there. And just doing like internships at them and getting exposure will really help you make a more informed decision.
Thank you, Thalia. Mkhokheli, I have a question from Ria Betswe, who asks, what are the most critical mistakes you've learned during your career, and how have you rebounded?
I would say the 2 most critical mistakes I've made. The first one is learn to be humble. I think like that's more like of a character trait, which I think you would meet sooner or later as you ascend certain things. Like learn to be humble, and I think like with humility, it would provide you a foundation of being teachable and coachable. Like you may know a lot of things leaving university, but also just be aware that outside university, things may be slightly different, you know, like a degree or two different, yeah? And I think, yeah, the second one is I think I touched on it, be like just engage with things. So what I would say is whatever you are doing now with your academics is the same person you will be when you are working. So if you are actually focusing on only what you love and not what you and you neglecting what you hate in your job, you'll carry that attitude forward to only focus on what you love and neglect what you hate, even though it's part of your job. So one of the mistakes that I did was not being rigorous enough with some parts of the job that I didn't like, and I ended up costing the company R250,000 rands. And yeah, if you're working in a startup and you cost a startup R250,000 rands, that's a lot of money. And I think that's when actually I had a wake-up call to say, hey, you can't just pick and choose and say, I love this part, I hate this part, so I'm going to focus on this. This is not school anymore. This is not university anymore. You actually have to be switched on and be present for most of the time and make sure that actually even the parts that you don't love, you figure out how to actually deal with them, you know, like to sort of like engage with them fully, at least to do the best job that you can with the best attitude that you can master up. Yeah.
So that's quite interesting. That's a massive, costly mistake to make, and it kind of lands very, very quickly and very, very hard. Yes. And I guess one then learns those lessons very, very quickly. For you, Sergio, what are some of the mistakes that you have made, and what have you rebounded? What has enabled you to rebound from?
Yeah, I think the one thing is that everybody at some point makes some mistakes. I mean, I remember as a young engineer working in research and development, mixing up my diameter and my radius, and something as simple as that, I kicked myself for. But I mean, fortunately, people understand that there's checks and balances, and you've got managers and so on. No one's perfect, and that's the thing that I also wanted to add to this topic is that when I started out working, the attitude that I had at that point was everyone else is clever and I don't know what I'm talking about, much like the previous panelists have said. But I think I wish I had been a lot more confident, sort of in what I do know and what I can add to the team. I think the perception of you as a young person starting out versus them having worked for 30 years, they know everything, that is a mistake I made. And as I sort of started working and got more experience, you realize just how much you do know starting out already and how much you can add to the company you work in. So I wish I had been a bit more confident earlier on, because I see young people coming in now also with sort of that attitude, and no one knows everything and everyone makes mistakes, no matter how long you've been in the organization or in the field.
So the theme of self-confidence, being self-aware, and fear, is a trend that I'm also hearing coming through. A question for you from Sepo, and I'm going to pose it to Chelsea. How did you find the jobs that you have now? The job that you have now, or any of the jobs you found that you've had?
Yeah, both the times that I found jobs. Okay, the first job that I got, I actually landed up just chatting to someone else in the industry, and I said, look, this is kind of what I'm thinking of doing, and he sent off my CV, and the next thing I had an interview. So that was really nice, and it's kind of a good sign, you know, if you are looking for jobs, try to make contacts in the industry and, you know, get to know people. And then the second job I again found through the Geomatics network. They posted an advertisement for it on their Facebook page. And I applied, and yeah, so that's how I landed up finding them. I managed to get another few job interviews when I was job hunting through LinkedIn as well. It's a really great place to find jobs. But yeah, just keeping up your professional network, making friends with the right people really does get you far when you're looking for a job.
Thank you, Chelsea. This is such an important question that's often asked by our students. So I'm going to ask it of everybody. So if there's anything else that you can add to what Chelsea said, Thalia.
Yeah, so I think searching for a job and searching for the right job is such an important process. And I think especially now, there's so many great platforms such as LinkedIn that will help you do that. So for my first job at Investec, I was on the Investec scholarship, which I actually applied. I think it was one of those like emails that EBE sends out like late on a Friday at the end of term, and I saw it and I had like a day to apply. And then little did I know, like literally just filling out this 1-page form would like change my entire career, because after I did the scholarship for 3 years, that fed really well into their graduate program. So that kind of like set me up for a career there. And then for my job at Aerobotics, I'm quite like good at posting on LinkedIn and just sharing like my experience in working. And I'll also like conduct a lot of like interviews with other graduates for various programs. So someone approached me to join Aerobotics, and I was like the biggest fan of Aerobotics. So it really felt like the right fit for me, and it still does. And I think, well, it's just really good to like stay in touch with like the different startups or the different industries in South Africa and the rest of the world. But they do evolve so rapidly. So like you do want to be like really marketable for them. And there are so many ways of upskilling yourself. It's like, I think what's really powerful these days is like the cloud courses that like AWS and Azure offer. Like even if you don't want to go into a traditional software engineering role, these courses are really accessible, and they're like really backed by a lot of major international companies. So I'd really recommend like looking into those if you are interested. But yeah, really just creating a good brand for yourself and putting yourself out there, because rejection is really scary, but like when you get the right job, it's honestly the best feeling.
Thank you. Lots of noddings have had. Sergio, how did you find the jobs that you have?
So getting into the company in the beginning was through, I think in 2nd or 3rd year, applying for a scholarship also at the company. But then beyond that, sort of being able to move around and so on, that was all applications and interviews, but also relationships and networks. I think that's the other thing for me to, I mean, I echo these sentiments of the other speakers. Someone that knows you and knows your ability, and someone who could help you fit into a certain space and so on. So I think the networks probably is as important as sort of your technical skill. I think focusing on that is important, and knowing having a base there is useful. But it's actually, I've honestly found it hard to find work in the absence of having a network of people. I think it's especially as you become more senior and more specific, there are certain spaces where you can fit in, and those spaces, networks help you tremendously. So it's developing that skill is useful for career development.
I saw Mkhokheli nodding his head. How did you find the jobs that you have, Mkhokheli?
I think I've had 3 or 4 jobs in the last 6 years or 7 years. The first job was me trying to be an entrepreneur, as I say, like trying to create a software company, which didn't work out. And the second job was because someone had seen the sort of determination for me to try and change the landscape of medical sort of record keeping in Zimbabwe. And they actually invited me to join a company that they had, which had a UK and a Zimbabwean branch. So that's how I found my second job. And my third job moving back to Cape Town was because I realized, I think at some point it clicked in my brain that, yeah, I think I do have quite a bit of potential. So let me try to see if I can go back to biomedical engineering, because that's what I studied. Yeah, and then I went back to Cape Town to work for Straight Access Technologies. And my current job, I found it, actually my current job found me. So what happened was in 2018, I had started a PhD with UCT in biomedical engineering. But what I was wanting to do was quite ahead of what UCT, where UCT was. So I ended up dropping the PhD and trying to do like a startup. And then someone found me from Netherlands and was like, hey, we see you've got a drive, you've got determination, and also you've got the skills we need. Probably you can apply all those things at Philips. And that's how the job found me. But also I posted those things on LinkedIn. So it helps to be visible as well. Yeah.
Thank you. So some very common threads that I'm hearing, LinkedIn, networking, build relationships. I guess be fearless and try things and believe in yourself. Ways of finding work. I just want to remind everybody, if you have a question, please to post it in the chat. I have a question for you from Timothy, Sergio. Do you think teamwork skills are easily accessible, especially during online classes? Timothy is a second-year mechanical engineering student.
Sorry, please can you repeat the question?
Do you think teamwork skills are easily accessible, especially during online classes?
Yeah, so it becomes even more important, but even more difficult to get. I think that's the sort of conundrum we're in, that we have to work even better in teams now that we're further apart, and it's even more difficult to develop those. So I think panelists mentioned this before, is that putting yourself out there. I think making the effort to engage with your team members now is even more important than it was before, because it's easy when you're sitting next to someone, but then making the effort to make the call and making the effort to listen carefully and understand what people are saying, those things via these sort of methods of communication becomes even more important. So unfortunately, yes, it's more difficult, but it's also more important.
Thank you. A question for you from Timothy Chelsea. I'm directing it to you. Do your marks matter in industry? And so say I've had a bad semester but passed all my courses, would that affect my job, my employability?
It's a bit of a tough question because companies tend to have different policies, at least from what I've seen, on marks. I mean, some will have just a cutoff average and say, if you don't have above this, sorry, we're not interested in your CV. Others might be a lot more flexible. If you've had one bad semester and you've passed everything, honestly, why are you even stressing in the first place? Overall, your average will still most likely be good. And I think if UCT still does what they did when I studied, your fourth year courses are weighted higher, your thesis, that sort of thing. And I typically find, well, I found with the group that I was studying with, everyone kind of did better because everyone was working on something that they themselves had picked and were interested in. So do, try work hard on that to get your average up if you are worried about it. But yeah, I know off the top of my head, there's one company that does a 65% cutoff. But it might not be that for everyone. And I mean, as long as you don't have like failure upon failure upon failure, most of the time, I don't think they're really going to be that interested. But, that's just been my experience so far.
Thank you, Chelsea. Thalia, I saw you nodding your head. Are marks important for you?
I think, as Chelsea said, like with certain companies, there are like an entry point to the interview. But like as I mentioned earlier, I think I conducted probably 200 plus interviews with graduates last year, and I don't think I looked at any of their marks. It was more about their willingness to learn, their enthusiasm for what they do, and things like that. Like obviously marks do help, but they aren't the end all be all. And I think if you have internship experience and things like that, you can use that to also build up your skills and your work readiness. And I think there are other ways of entering as well. I think I've seen quite a new trend where if there's a company that you really, really like, you'll identify someone in a similar role that you want and like get them to mentor you. So I think like that's a really powerful way of doing it, because then you kind of get like a more informed insight into what the role entails, as opposed to like just a job description, which will be like 65% and above, but that doesn't really give you the full picture of what the job entails. So I think, yeah, just marks really aren't, they are important, I'm not gonna lie, but I think there are ways to like buffer yourself with like internships and then also with like those online courses that I mentioned.
Thank you, Thalia. There's a question that's come for you, and I'm going to ask you a follow-up question then. Please, can you repeat the credible web sources that you mentioned could be used to build programming skills?
I'll link them in the chat as well, but I know Amazon does their AWS courses, and they're different like career paths. So they could be like a cloud computing one. So if you just want to go into cloud and containers, there's like a systems architecture one. So if you want to start designing systems, there's also really nice like product management courses. So like UX, UI, and then there's the Azure offering, which is the Microsoft kind of suite, which is like comparable to AWS. And then there's Udemy, but the Udemy courses are paid. But I think there are like student licenses you can get for those. But again, I'll put them in the chat. But I really, really encourage you to even like watch YouTube videos. I think I've learned entire software languages via YouTube. And like never underestimate the power of a free resource when you're willing to put in the efforts.
Thank you, Thalia. Just to remind everybody that we are recording the session, so if there's anything that you've missed, you can come back to it and listen to it and view it again. Mkhokheli, there's a question for you. Could you elaborate on your experience in starting your own healthcare startup? How easy is it to transition from work, from the lab to an actual product?
I would say it's very difficult. It's taken me about 3-4 years to actually try and figure out exactly what I am trying to do itself. Because when I started in South Africa, it was, I mean, you start off with this like a high energy, I'm going to conquer the world, I'm going to make this device, I'm going to make it in 4 months. And then you gain a bit of knowledge, then you realize that to design a device in 4 months is a bit on the sort of like unrealistic side because of the life cycle of the product itself, like the design cycle. And then after 2 years I've just been kind of like thinking about, hey, how do I proceed? So I'm working with some surgeons. So we've got 3 devices, and I'm working with some surgeons at UCT in the urology department. And one of our devices is actually now undergoing first in human trials, right? But now also, because I mean, I sit in Netherlands, but the device has to go for trials in South Africa also, there is that complication. So I've had to register a company in Netherlands so that actually you can do things, you know, the correct way. But also I'm new to Netherlands. I don't know anything about registering companies and also all the sort of like different things that apply. Plus, yeah, so it actually takes a lot of time, a lot of patience, particularly when you're young. But also I would say like it's the best thing to do when you're young because you've got less to lose and got more time as well to spend working on that. So yeah, I think the experience has been quite fulfilling in the sense that like there's some things that actually I've learned about sort of like the Dutch startup culture. Whereas there's some people who've been here for 10 years and they've been thinking about it, but they haven't engaged it that they don't know. And also in South Africa, I know a bit about that. So yeah, I think it's been very rewarding, very fulfilling, but at the same time quite taxing because now like you have to help put out this product, but it's not just a product because this thing goes into human beings. So you need to get some ethical certification, and there's like 1,000-page documents that you need to fill in, but I've got an 8-hour per day job as well that keeps the lights on. So yeah.
Thank you, Mkhokheli. Thalia, can you share some of your startup experience and the challenges you faced?
Yeah, so I guess it's a bit different because I didn't start this one, but definitely would love to start my own startup going forward. But yeah, it was really interesting transitioning from a corporate into a startup. I'd heard like both positives and negatives about startup life, but I think it's definitely something that suits me because it's so fast paced. Like you have full ownership over everything you do. There's very little red tape, which is like a bit scary. Whereas like with corporates, you know, there's a much better like pipeline and a lot more control. So definitely a safer space to learn. Like with the startup, like you'll be pushing everything straight to production, editing data like in production. And especially like with drones, they are so temperamental. I think just last week, our drones in California, the one overheated, so it like fainted and fell out the sky. So like it's a very like dynamic environment, but I definitely think like if you do think that you like that freedom and you just like collaborating with like-minded people, I definitely recommend a startup, especially some of them in Cape Town. Like just being at aerobotics, I've gotten to meet so many other startup like people in other startups, and it's like there's such cool startups in Cape Town. Like I think it's really like the Silicon Valley of Africa, as I think one of the recent articles depended as being. So yeah, 10 out of 10 would recommend from my experience. But it is a lot of work, and I think I definitely joined a more mature startup. I know like the early fledgling stages were quite intense, but I think, you know, not all of them will succeed. But I think the learnings and stuff that you get from them are invaluable.
Thank you, Thalia. So you and Mkhokheli described some of the kind of ways of doing and ways of being in a startup culture. And so, Sergio, I want to ask you and Chelsea, and I'll start with you, Chelsea. What has been the difficulty for you transitioning from university into formal work, dealing with culture, a formal work culture?
I definitely think probably the first challenge that comes to mind is you're working with real people's data that is getting organizations off the ground. And it's private stuff. It's not just something that you've gone and downloaded randomly from some website or that your lecturer's given you. It's actually data that's being used to make decisions. So there are real consequences if you mess up. That was the one thing. You do gain confidence, of course, in your own abilities, but especially initially, that was really, really rough for me to sort of come to terms with. Yeah, the other big challenge was just kind of going from this environment in university where you're really flexible a lot of the time. You're kind of working on your own, maybe through the night or, at whatever hours you want to set for yourself. You're going to lectures, some people prefer to bunk and rather just watch the recordings or whatever. At least that's how it was pre-COVID. And then suddenly having to go into an office environment or even just an environment where you've sort of got to be online from 8 until 5. It can be a bit of an adjustment. I mean, now it's just like second nature to me. I get up, make myself a cup of coffee and come sit at my desk. But when I started, it was a bit of a difficult adjustment. Yeah, that's kind of it from my side.
Sergio, what was the transition like for you?
I think similarly, the thing I would add when I compare having worked with being in university and even being in school, in the structured university environment, it's pretty clear what you need to do when. You know that next year you're going to the next year. You know your courses 3 years in advance, and there's a lot of structure. What I found, in addition, is the fact that that's wide open once you start working. Like the possibilities of where you could go and what you could do and which courses to do, and there's no equivalent career advising center for people necessarily working, because you can go from banking to finance to engineering and sort of how you navigate that path, sort of through mentors and sponsors and help. I think the letting the guide wheel sort of off your bike and then sort of going on your own is what I found challenging without the structure, but sort of navigating your own space, and I think that's interesting, but definitely challenging. I think developing that confidence in what you want to do and figuring life out as you go is different compared to the structured environment of education.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for sharing your wisdom with us and your insights. Mkhokheli, I was going to ask a follow-up question from Vincent, but I see that you've answered in the chat, and so Vincent, if that's enough of a response to you, that would be. It looks like that's enough of a response, but I'm wondering if you could maybe just share your answer the question anyway for everyone else who might be interested. Mkhokheli.
Yes. Okay. I see the follow-up question is how to get into that space. I think that would be the summary. I think the best way to get into the biomedical space would be, I would say, like maybe link up with people on LinkedIn to start with. The way that I got into it was I studied a master's in biomedical engineering. So by the time I finished my master's, I was quite aware of like who are the industry players. And I see also that Vincent worked at SAT or interned at SAT. It's a great company to start at because you will get to see what it is like to develop a medical product as well. Yeah. So first of all, like if you're coming from like I would say like a engineering, hardcore engineering, like mechanical, and you haven't been in biomedical, first thing to do is to maybe reach out to someone in the biomedical engineering group within the medical school at UCT. They'll give you great pointers. Alternatively, you can reach out to me and then I can give you some companies that I know from top of my head. Yeah, and that's how like I sort of was helped also. So I wanna pay it forward. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I was thinking of a last question to ask everybody that wasn't so serious, and so I guess the question I wanted to ask a question that came to mind was around what's the fun thing you did at university that still stays with you? Sergio, maybe I can start with you.
Sure, that's a difficult. I mean, we did so many things. I think what I remember from about UCT is the proximity to everything else in Cape Town. I think the proximity to we took trains from campus down Main Road to either east or south or whichever direction that is. I think that's what I recall or remember from being a student. It's being able to have the access to the beach, have the access to the mountain, access to the environment around Cape Town. I think that's what I miss and what stands out for me as an experience. So while on campus is great, the access to other things is also fantastic.
And for you, Chelsea?
I definitely agree with Sergio, like, especially now not living in Cape Town anymore, just the vibe of being in Cape Town, getting to move around on the train, walking around town, that sort of thing. It was all like really fun. The other thing I definitely add was I made such good friends in my program that I still chat to this day. The friendships that I made just got me through some of the toughest courses. And, you know, all of my best memories involved doing things with my friends, whether or not that was varsity related or if we were hanging out or doing something else or going to a party or whatever. Yeah, I definitely say that was the best part of varsity for me.
Mkhokheli, what was it for you?
For me, I've always played football and I still play football now. I'm well into my mid-30s and I'm still playing with 20-somethings. It's hard to keep up because, you know, that's men called age has come for me. But I still enjoy it because, like, you get to sort of like run around, meet new people, you know, work as a team in the field. So, yeah, that's one thing, yeah.
And what was it for you, Thalia?
I think for me, similar to Chelsea, it was definitely the friends I made in my mechatronics degree, especially like the female friends, because I think there's so few females in engineering. I think there were 9 of us in my year mechatronics, and we've just been like the best of friends. And like, it's honestly so cool to see them all killing it in their like individual like career paths. So yeah, I think I really look back fondly on my time in mechatronics and all those hours in Menzies, sleeping on the floor of White Lab when you're hustling to make your thesis work. You know, it's all of those moments that in the moment you probably are like, I'm not going to miss this. But like one day you'll look back and be like, wow, like I miss these people and doing like, you know, signing out of Green Lab at 2 a.m. after doing like an AutoCAD model. So yeah, definitely live in the moment. I know like with COVID, it's probably not the same. But just like when you can connect to your classmates, it's so worth it.
So what I'm hearing is like form really good friendships when you're at university, do things that you enjoy that take you out, so you can get active, so you can learn the lessons of teamwork, exercising, taking care of yourself, all wonderful values to have when you start out, and the university gives you an opportunity to do that. I want to say thank you to all of you for your generosity of your time, your generosity of sharing your resources with our students, and your insight and your wisdom. Thalia, Mkhokheli, Chelsea, and Sergio, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to host you, and to everybody else, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your feedback. Please, if you can complete the questionnaire, it takes literally 2 minutes to complete. We value your feedback and we always change and enhance what we offer based on the feedback we get. Thank you very much. If the panelists, if you have 5 minutes afterwards, just for us to debrief when everybody's left the room, if that's okay with you, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.